Welcome back to the Somatic Hound podcast, where we're talking about everything to do with your canine companion, how to have a healthy nervous system, and also support your dog having a healthy nervous system so that we can all live in some sort of semi-regulated state on a regular basis, hopefully. And today I'm presenting you with something a little bit different because I was actually interviewed for a podcast called Ruff Around the Edges, and that podcast is hosted by Kajsa van Overbeek, and she is a coach who helps people with reactive dogs. So she's a mindset coach, and her niche is reactive dog owners. It was such a perfect fit. We had a really interesting conversation. I also interviewed Kajsa, so that will be the next episode coming out here on the Somatic Hound. But I wanted you to hear our first conversation. I think it was a really useful and productive exchange, so I wanted to share it with you here. Oh, I forgot to say, Kajsa's from the Netherlands. She's located in the Netherlands. So if you're interested in checking out her work, I'm going to link all of her contact info in the show notes, and she can work with you virtually. So I think that's it. Let's just jump into the episode.
I am talking to someone all the way over in the United States, in Tennessee to be precise. It's Leah Lycos. And this is actually the second time that I'm recording this because Rusty barked through the first time. And I had this whole intro. And what I'm thinking right now is I'm just going to skip that. And I'm just going to hand the mic over to Leah and ask her to introduce herself and what she does, her dogs, the whole thing. So, Leah, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Kajsa. Yes, I'm a dog trainer in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and my company name is Canine Movement Lab, mainly because I put a big emphasis on the way dogs move, the importance of movement, and somatic therapy for dogs. I'm really more of a dog behaviorist because I help people with shy, fearful, reactive, and even aggressive dogs. So that's my specialty. And currently I have 3 dogs, Eva, Biggie, and Mia. And I guess I'll just say that I connected with you. I think I started following you on Instagram, and I was currently in a mindset coaching program for my business and kind of rethinking maybe I should do coaching for people for their dogs instead of presenting myself as a dog trainer. And then I found you and I was so intrigued. I was like, oh, that's what this person's doing.
It's a thing.
Yeah. So that's how I started following you and, really consuming your content and being really interested in it, because for me, a big part of dog training when I work with people is I'm really comfortable with the dogs and interacting with the dogs, but I have had to really work on my people skills and how to help the people kind of get their mindset correct to approach the training, because a lot of these dogs have very severe behavioral issues and it's pretty stressful, to be honest. So, yeah, I guess that's how we connected.
Okay, hold on, because I think I have 5 questions already lined up just by all of the things that you just said. And just for everyone listening, we haven't talked about any of this before. This is completely unscripted. We're just whatever comes to mind, we are going to be talking about it. So you said a couple of things. Movement is important, and then the somatic work, and then the people work. Okay, that's 3 things, not 4 or 5, but that's already things that I want to know more about. So, for example, when you say, I find movement very important, What do I make of that? What does that entail?
Sure. So, my feeling is that whatever the dog is doing physically is usually a representation of how they're feeling emotionally. So, even more so than humans, I feel like the dog is in the moment with like really no separation between mind and body. So I think instead of like having thoughts about things, I think they have feelings, and you can see those feelings in the way they hold their body, in their muscle tone, in the way that they move. Like, so if their movement is very laminar and like it looks very flowy, it's pleasant to look at, you kind of get a nice feeling when you see this dog running through a field. Like that dog feels good, or the mouth is open, the eyes are relaxed, the jaw is relaxed. You can sense with your gut, just with a quick glance at the dog, what their emotional state is. So it's not just movement, it's taking in the whole body and what the body is doing. And then, kind of in conjunction with that, what I see in a lot of training is that we're trying to control the dog's movement instead of kind of like embracing their need to move when they feel aroused by something. So I place a lot of emphasis on that by playing tug. We do a lot of resistance feeding or even resistance training so that instead of asking the dog to not have energy or not show their energy, we're asking the dog to express their energy, but in a constructive and flowy way that feels good. So, like if a dog gets stuck in their reactivity, they're either freezing up or they're lunging, surging at something. We need to take that energy and then help them move in a way that feels good and expresses a coherent emotional state.
Okay, more questions coming up. First of all, I have not heard of the term resistance feeding before. What is that?
Okay, it's something that I learned from my trainer under whom I apprenticed, and he created natural dog training. And in that system, it's actually called pushing because the dog is pushing for food. What I found is confusing for people is when I call it pushing, they think they're supposed to be pushing the dog away from them. But what we want to do as people is offer resistance as we feed the dog. And there are many different ways to do this, whether the dog's on a back tie, a helper could be holding your dog in a harness, or you just offer resistance with your non-dominant hand. So what we are doing as the human is resistance feeding. What the dog is doing is pushing their body into you, expressing their drive, and then ingesting food. And this helps complete a predatory cycle where, like, say the dog gets aroused by a squirrel or a cat. So now they get fixated, right? And they can't complete that cycle because we're not going to let them go
Yeah,
after
chase
somebody's
down the squirrel.
cat, chase squirrels, they're on a leash. Even if they're free, it's unlikely they're going to actually catch and eat a squirrel, right? Or like bring it back to the den. So we have to do something with that energy. So overcoming the resistance kind of simulates the hunt and the resistance that they would overcome by taking down prey. And then they get to actually ingest food, which it completes that predatory sequence so the dog feels grounded again.
Uh, Tons of stuff coming up in my mind because I think I can see it. And also, I see a danger, I guess, in the sense of when are we like frustrating the dog? Like, how do you know that, like, I guess we never know, but how do we know that this is beneficial to the dog? And I'm just thinking that because I'm continuously always also challenging the way I interact with my dog as well. And one of the things was, I think I might have just done a post or an emailer about it, where I was like, okay, before, for example, if I would teach, I guess a leave it or whatever you want to call it, like in the old days, I would just offer the treat on my hand And then the dog wants to get it, close the hand. And then if the dog backs up, open the hand and then say, okay, whatever release word, and then go get the treat. Whereas if I were to teach that now that I'm like more into, for example, what's the errorless training, I would probably train it differently or try to train it differently so that there's less frustration from the side of the dog. And if I hear this, like my brain is going to, okay, so what is this like for the dog? Is this a situation that's similar to that or not? Like, how do we know that the dog is, yeah, probably not frustrated or probably not annoyed by this? Or like, what are the risks involved? Well, tell me like I'm just curious, like, tell me all the things. What do you look out for? What cues are you taking into account? Because
Sure.
this is the first time I've heard of this, so I'm super intrigued.
Yeah, it's kind of a new way to train using the dog's drive, and those are all great questions because there is a caveat to this. If you have a dog that's very uh let's say they have resource guarding, then this is something that can actually bring up their stress around food, and you have to be careful. So, if you have that type of dog, I'm sure you would have some inkling that, like, your dog guards his food bowl. So, when you first start doing this, it will activate that very trigger. So, there are instances where we would work on a different activity first, like actually doing some bite work and tugging. So I get what you're saying. It's like, are we frustrating the dog? Not really on purpose. What we're actually trying to do is resolve their frustration because if you're walking your dog on a leash and say they see a squirrel, but they're not allowed to chase the squirrel, they're already building frustration. So this is a way for them to express their drive and actually resolve it rather than continue to feel frustrated by the restraint of the leash.
And if I hear you correctly, you sort of check in with the dog and their character and who they are, and then choose what am I going to do to help them complete the stress cycle? Is it going to be, like you said, resistance feeding, or is it maybe something else that works better for this dog and doesn't add to the frustration? Because I guess if I hear you say like this is my interpretation. I want to complete the stress cycle. That's how I hear it
Mhm.
for the dog. Like, let it come to its natural closure. And if you have a dog who is, for example, like you said, resource guarding, or whereby just taking or keeping away or making them work against that pressure for their food is more of a trigger, then we're not closing it. We're just adding on for that particular dog. Or am I getting it
It
wrong
actually
now?
does resolve it, but you just have to be careful not to add too much resistance right away because some dogs will like snap and bite your hand. I'm talking about pretty severe behavioral cases. So, like typical pet owner, typical dog that doesn't have really severe resource guarding, it's not dangerous to do with them. I'm talking about dogs who like already have bite histories, maybe a history of abuse. Those are cases that would be approached maybe a little bit differently, but you just have to think about like all the stimulation that your dog normally takes in just from being a dog, just from being a predator aroused by prey, or being territorial against other dogs coming into their space. Um, which is instinctual and biological. So we're taking those situations and giving the dog a way to work with that energy so that they feel grounded and kind of come back to a neutral state. But some dogs have more, say, toy drive, like my pit bull would much rather bite and tug a toy when she saw a squirrel rather than push for food.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So this was sort of what I was thinking, that you match it to the character or the type, or well, I guess to the dog in front of you. So what would you see then if um when you're working with them like that? So they're aroused, and then like you either, like for your pit bull, you would maybe work with the toy and the biting, and then, or for another dog, it would be this type of resistance feeding. What happens? What do I see? I'm already fascinated. Like what would I see?
Yeah, so you want to lay a little bit of a foundation with like a positive interrupt. So I always say ready. That's the like cue word to like, hey, get ready. We're going to work. But our work is really play training. So you kind of lay a foundation. If you have a backyard where it's low stimulation and low distraction, that's where I would like charge up that ready word. And same way you would charge up any sort of like cue. We use tons of food or games. I let the dog chase me. I play with the dog. Ready just means, hey, get ready. We're going to do something really exciting. So when they see something then out in the wild or in the world, when you leave your yard or leave the house, and they feel that high level of arousal or excitement or even play drive towards another dog, the key is if you're not able to let your dog run and chase and play with everybody or everything that it wants to, then they can look to you and you can play with them and resolve that. So it's either, again, you're right. It totally depends on the dog. Some dogs are very motivated by play. So the thing is just to teach them that they can turn to you to get what they need, so they don't have to continue feeling that frustration of, oh, I'm always on the leash. I can never get to the thing I want. And then with like the handler always telling the dog not to have energy, to like sit and look and stay and calm down. Like I'm asking the dog, hey, I want you to show me that energy.
Got it. What was the second thing that I was talking about? So we did movement, but it is the somatic side of it. How does that tie in?
Yeah, I mean, that's basically what we're talking about is just using the body and the dog's expression of energy as a way to resolve their stress. And so some of the other, I guess you could say, somatic technologies that we would use are teaching the dog to bark on command. That's a really good way to resolve stress. It's also a great way to teach impulse control, because what we're doing is when the dog feels a level of stress and arousal where they would normally like surge and bark, if we can get them to collect themselves and bark, we're still allowing for their emotional energy to move and for them to project that emotional energy forward while they're holding their body back in a collected manner. So that's a little more complicated to explain, but it's a little bit more of a refinement of the resistance feeding or surging for a toy. Basically, what we're doing is we're collecting the dog's drive and attracting it to us. And then we can do different things with it. So you don't always have to resistance feed. You don't always have to let the dog bite and tug. You do need them to engage with you and then do something with their energy. So getting them collected and then allowing them to bark on command or asking them to bark on command is another sort of somatic way of moving the dog's energy.
I'm trying to think of applications for us. So I'm just thinking with the barking on cue, I have sort of maybe half, but not entirely reliably taught Rusty um, to bark. Not really, because the first time that we clicked and reinforced, well, wasn't really clicking, that we just reinforced it. He did the cutest little huff and he did a cute little jump. And so now his whisper cue is, let me half jump up with my two front paws and then do huff. And that's whisper. So then we tried speak, as in, like do a proper bark. And what happens at the moment is that he will start off with a whisper, and then us idiots who have, like repeated the cue 10 times, which you're never supposed to do, but still we're human and we do it. So we just go like, no, no, speak. And then, of course, we get louder and then we get even. So at one point, we're like, no, speak. And then he goes like, oh, right, that's what you mean. Ruff. Okay, fine. But how could I then use this in Like, would you say, for example, he sees a cat in the street, which is cats are like arch enemy number one, and then that amps him up. So what I would have been doing up until now would be like just sort of see the cat, throw a piece of food, see the cat, throw a piece of food to the point where we can then just walk by the cat. But would you say then you could maybe use the barking and say, you know what, I see that you're riled up. There's the cat. You know what? Let's do a couple of speak barks and then just get it out. Would that be something or?
I would, yeah. It depends on Rusty. If he likes that pathway as a way to express himself, and that's the quickest way to get him coherent and engaging with you, then like, yes, he could bark. You could even create like this whole flow where like he barks, then he pushes into you for food, then he collects and he goes into a down and then he recalls to you. So it kind of depends on you and your dog and what the dynamic is and kind of how he best expresses himself. He might like to see the cat turn towards you, bite the tug, carry the tug toy, play a little tug with him, let him win, and then he carries the toy.
Got it. Well, I mean, I'm like my brain's already going like, yeah, forget about the tug. He's
He's not
not a
into
big
toys.
tugger, although I do carry a tug. Like I have my whole little, my treat pouch and then the tug and the muzzle and the
Yeah.
whole thing. Like I feel like I'm completely packed when I go outside. Um, I'm just brainstorming this. You're just giving me ideas, which I like. Which maybe that's a nice segue into the other thing that I wanted to ask you because so where I am at right now with all the thought work and the mindset work that I've done for myself, I feel pretty okay with, like collecting pieces of information from all over, different trainers, different professionals, and trying to figure out, okay, does this jive with me? Does this work with my values, with how I want to work with my dog? All of those things. Um, but that took me quite a bit to get there and to figure out, like you said, like, okay, there's no one generic piece of advice that works for every dog, that works for every human or for every dog human team. And you said that at the beginning when you did the little introduction, like one of the things that I'm working on is, dealing with the people. How do you work with your humans? And I'm guessing that your humans might have questions or I'm pretty sure not all of them are just going to go like, yeah, I'm just going to do everything that Leah says and I'm just not going to question anything. And guess that might be ideal from a trainer perspective. Like I say it, you do it. But how do you deal with that aspect and what do you notice in your humans? What are they struggling with? Is it figuring out what works for their dog, figuring out what works for them? Do they push back? Is that hard? Is that hard on you? So tell me a little bit more about that human side of it.
Yes, it can be challenging. I do have like a handful of clients who just from the get-go are like, I love this. I totally get it. And they get right on board and they do everything I tell them to. And it's amazing. Most people are like, I don't want the dog to bark. Why are you teaching the dog to bark? Or like, I'm really big on letting the dogs make contact, which I let the dogs hop up and put their feet on me, their front feet. Because I think it's better for the dog to make contact with me than to constantly feel frustrated that he can't make contact with everybody else. And so, yeah, a big part of this is most people are telling me, I'm teaching the dog not to jump up. I'm teaching my dog not to bark. And now you're telling me you want the dog to jump up and bark and all of this. So it's quite challenging at times. And sometimes people get on board and sometimes they don't, or they get kind of like partially on board and we modify the exercises and we keep the dog on the ground. And like I'm totally open to that. I do find that wherever the human has a block, is kind of related to where the dog is having issues. So this might be where we can talk about that um, kind of idea that your dog is your mirror.
Yeah.
And I know that, in the little correspondence that we had, we talked about whether or not that's even helpful to introduce that concept. And I think for some people it is, and some people are already so kind of, I don't want to say obsessed, but like they're so worried about how their emotional state is affecting the dog that like I don't want to talk about that. I want to relieve a lot of their fears and stress around that by saying, look, your dog has his own issues and we're going to work with your dog. Let's not focus on what's going on with you right now because they're almost like too focused on it. It almost like
Yeah.
inhibits them. They think they have to like fix all their own issues before the dog will be okay.
Exactly. Yeah. And this is so interesting because when you brought that up, for me, the first thing was like, oh, and that's the thing I wish everyone would stop saying, like your dog mirrors you or your dog picks up on your stress. But again, it's not as black and white as that. And I think what it comes down to is precisely what you just described. It is what you do with that. And for a lot of like my people, they are the super empathic perfectionists who want to do like they're already going above and beyond for their dog. Half of the time they're just not seeing it. And then when you add something like, okay, I'm just going to use stress rather than the direct of your dog mirrors you. Like if it's your dog picks up on your stress, what a lot of my clients then try to or tend to do is go, oh, I can't be stressed because my dog's going to pick up on that. So before I get out the door, I have to be all zen. And I always well, don't joke, but I do joke because we also have a lot of fun in our coaching sessions. Is yeah, how does that feel? Like, oh, I can't be stressed. I have to be all zen now. I have to be calm. So to me, that's just that thought of I have to be calm. I have to get rid of the stress before I walk out the door because otherwise, whatever can go wrong will go wrong because my dog's picking up on it. That is so stress inducing. I don't even want you to think about that. Like your dog is perfectly capable of being stressed without you. Your dog's also perfectly capable of being zen without you. So let's not even go there. But exactly for the reason that of what that does with the human. Whereas if the human goes, yeah, my dog picks up on my stress and uses that in a scenario where it helps them, right, where it serves them, then I'm all for it. So I guess in that sense, nothing's ever black and white. To me, it's all about what is the sentence? What does the belief do for you? And the same, I guess, is true for when we're working with labels. Sometimes saying I have a reactive dog can be super helpful because it gives you a way to name what's going on. It's like, oh, is that what it is? Okay, now that, oh, and there's other people who have reactive dogs. Oh, right. But when it becomes, I have a reactive dog and this is the end of the world, then I want to say ditch the label. So again, it's all with the interpretation and does it serve the people? So in your world and how you are working with it, like you said, there's the people who are already so involved where you say, okay, we're just going to focus on the dog and we're just going to leave you out of it. That's probably more where I am with a lot of my clients. But the other part, I'm also very curious about that. Like when you think it could be helpful to say that, who are those people and how do you work with that? And also, it's like three questions in one. How do you know which of those humans you're dealing with?
Wow, yeah, that's really interesting. I guess I see it like everyone's kind of on a spectrum. So we kind of talked about the people who are already super sensitive, very empathic. They totally understand that their dog is connected to them on a really deep level and is feeling what they are feeling. That the dog can pick up on their stress. And then you have people who are how do I say this? They're a little less in touch with their own feelings or their own embodiment, and they don't really understand the way that they might be projecting onto the dog, or they might be kind of not emotionally open to their dog and unable to create like a really trusting bond with the dog because they're kind of closed off even to themselves. So of course, how can they open themselves emotionally to the dog? So that person who might be a little less aware of their own emotions, how their emotional state is affecting the dog, then I might introduce a little bit of that just slowly. I guess to give an example of when I do think it's helpful, I have a rescue dog right now who I have really struggled to bond with. And so I had to look at, oh, how is this young, fearful dog kind of representing a part of myself that I don't want to connect with?
Hmm.
And it really helped. I'm still struggling with it quite a bit, to be honest, but I have to remind myself that if there's a reason why I feel I can't bond with or accept this dog, it's because there's a part of me that's actually exactly like her that I'm not ready to kind of like integrate. So, I mean, that gets a little bit deeper and heavier than like most people want to go, like looking at internal family systems and, your inner child and reparenting yourself. But I mean, it has helped a lot. It's helped me. And so the more open I am, obviously, to the dog, because I'm like, oh, this is a part of myself I don't like. It's not that I don't like her. Like, there's not really
Right.
anything wrong with the dog, but it
Yeah.
helps me understand the relationship and then be more open.
Would you say when you do the work that you are more inclined to start with yourself or with your dog? And let me explain what I mean by that. So something that I preach, so to say, is radical self-acceptance. Like accept every bit of yourself, the parts you hate, the parts you would rather tuck away, all of those. Because when you do, and it doesn't matter where you start, but when, like, if you start with yourself, you will find it easier to accept the parts of your dog also that, you might not like. But it also works the other way around. So for some people, it's much easier to say, oh, this dog is reactive, or this dog has, I don't know, can't come up with something else. Reactive is always, because that's my sort of easiest frame of reference, is always an easy one. It's like, okay, but that doesn't mean that they're a bad dog. For some people, it's easier to start at the dog and then figure out, okay, that reactivity is part of them. They're still a great dog. And then to use that and project it or work on themselves from that same sort of scenario where they're like, okay, wait a minute, if a reactive dog is a great dog and a good dog and it doesn't mean anything bad, then if I think about myself that I am too, I don't know, too rude or not selfless enough or whatever it is that we're thinking about ourselves somehow, then that doesn't mean that I'm a bad person either. And then I can maybe also start to embrace and love those parts of myself. Then that also works. And like I said, for some people, it's easier to start with them, and then that helps them accept a dog. For some people, it's easier to start with the dog, and then it helps them accept them. Like, it's probably spectrum, but where would you say that you were? Like, was it for you more start with me, and then that helps with the dog, or was it more the other way around?
I definitely found that working on myself was kind of like the the first step. So like 10 years ago, I got sober. I started going to therapy. I started really kind of waking up from just operating out of my unconscious patterns. And then the dogs got so much better without me even doing anything with the dogs. So for me, it was like that. The beautiful thing about the training that I do with the dogs and teach people to do is that because it's so based on movement and somatics and moving energy and reading the dog's body language, is that even if somebody is not open to looking at themselves, they've come to me for help with the dog. So they are open to studying their dog, looking at their dog's maybe like hypervigilance or sensitivity. And again, looking at the body language and understanding, like, oh, that trigger makes my dog feel really uncomfortable. And I need to help him either get out of this situation or move his energy or comfort him. And then I think it helps them, even if it's unconsciously, they start to kind of understand themselves through studying the dog. And they may or may not have those insights, like I said, consciously, but I do think it helps even in a small way. And so even if the human gets a little bit of relief from their own anxiety about why they are the way they are, then it helps them relax a little bit. And then if they relax a little bit, then the dog relaxes a little bit. And then things kind of start like spiraling upward. Even if we never have that direct conversation about mirroring, because I think it also goes both ways. Like I'm very attracted to dogs who have severe behavioral issues. That makes my life sometimes really stressful. So now I'm kind of picking up on my dog's stress. Like it's a two-way
Yeah.
street. I can't say like, oh, my dog's only like that because of me and my stress. Like I've taken on some dogs that come with really heavy baggage, and that affects my emotional state because of co-regulating and co-dysregulating that happens. So I think these are all really interesting questions. And for everybody, the process is a little bit different.
It's funny that you say that you also pick up on your dog's stress because I've started noticing that as well, that sometimes I'm on a walk, then I feel really antsy a little bit and I go, what's going on? And then I realized that Rusty's been very, you were talking about body language of the dog, like his body language was off. It was very, everything was very tense. There's a lot of like, like whipping the head from left to right. And there's just a lot of, for him, it's usually, you just see tenseness. You see it in the way he carries his tail. You see it in the way his ears are pricked. And then I realized that I'm picking up on that. Then I notice, okay, hold on a second. I got to do something with this. Got to feel my way through that. And then, like I'm good to go and to continue on the walk again. So it definitely works both ways. But I like that you mentioned the upward spiral, because I think what happens for a lot of people is they get caught in the opposite of that one, like in the downward spiral. And then it becomes just so hard to break it. Well, at least, like that's what I help them with. And then they do realize what was going on and they do manage to change it into an upward cycle. You said for some people, like we could do this without even, addressing the mirroring. Do you feel that or are you now also just really addressing it specifically for them? Like, are you talking to them about them and just leaving the dog completely out of it doesn't work because the dog's part of their life, but like really addressing their part? Also, if I hear that, like you've done a lot of work, so you probably have a lot of tools at your disposal already. Is that something that you're doing, or are you really trying to keep it sort of under the guise of working with the dog still?
That's how I do it. I mostly keep it focused on the work with the dog, and I address the dog's health, their emotional well-being from like many different angles, from nutrition, supplements, exercise, biological fulfillment, the playing, the training through the play, tapping into the dog's natural drives. making sure they're spending enough time outside. So all of these things, I'm kind of like a health coach for dogs. But then what happens is because people are getting outside with their dog and playing and moving and exercising, like the people start to feel better and they also start to see the importance of taking care of their dog's needs from like the a bottom up approach. They kind of start to realize that without me even coaching them on what they need, they kind of see like, oh, maybe I should be spending more time outside, or maybe I need more exercise. And these things naturally resolve anxiety and stress. And so it kind of goes hand in hand, but it's it like I don't call myself a coach. I'm not a trained therapist, so I can't really it's difficult for me to say, "Hey, don't you think you feel scared in these situations?" And maybe that's why you brought this dog into your life, is to show you that you actually are afraid of men. Like that's really bold to like just come out and say that to somebody who has hired you as a dog trainer. I have gotten to that point with certain clients if we build enough rapport and I can say like, "Hey, Heather, I think this might actually be your issue." You know, something like that, and very receptive to it. This is like after months of working together and creating a relationship where I can broach that subject. But really going through the channel of just focusing on the dog's health and well-being and the importance of biological fulfillment and exercise and trust and safety and connection, they kind of get it through that.
I love that. I mean, I do always say how you do one thing is how you do everything. And that definitely translates. If we're talking about how that translates, for example, the nutrition, the movement, the triggers, all of that. For the dog, you've given a couple of examples, like asking the dog to bark or tug or the resistance feeding. How does that translate for you? Like what do you, this is maybe a nasty question, I'm putting you on the spot, but what do you do for you when you are in the amped up state? Like what are your coping strategies?
Yes, I go through different phases depending on what's going on with me emotionally. Last summer, I went to kickboxing. That was extremely therapeutic for me. I think I had blocked a lot of my anger and it was coming out as anxiety. So uncovering those layers through kickboxing, going to the gym. I do my own resistance work at the gym. I go to yoga for stillness and mindfulness. I go and get massage. That's actually one thing we didn't talk about. Like, massage is a big part of what I teach people, like how to touch the dog in a way that's not just petting, but actually like supporting the nervous system. So if I'm doing my own work, which I'm not always great at, I will make sure that like I go and get myself a massage, or I make sure I meet friends for coffee so that I have connection with other people. It's a whole range of things. So the kickboxing to me would be like the equivalent of like playing tug with a dog. Like they get to fight,
Yeah.
so I get to kind of like fight through my anger by punching a bag. If you get stuck on one thing, you could actually reduce your emotional capacity. So just like with the dogs, it's important to have activities where they express a high level of arousal and drive. Like we also need to teach them how to then relax after that event. So I think I'm going off kind of on a tangent, but those are some of the things, I guess, examples of things that I would do for myself that would kind of be analogous to what we're doing for the dogs.
I like that you mentioned the variety of things though. Um, and that you're also trying out different things. Like if I distill correctly, the kickboxing was, like you said, it was something that I was doing. Was it this summer? Did you say this summer?
Mm.
Um, and then maybe you've tried other things as well. Is this something that you had to train that was a conscious thing at first and then now becomes more of a habit of, oh, I feel this is probably my like my trigger, my sign to start moving my body, or this is my sign to, maybe pull out the yoga mat or do something else or go for a walk in nature. Was there, I mean, not to say that it's ever finished, but was there some kind of skill building involved in that? Or did that just progress naturally? I guess that is skill building, and progressing naturally is more or less intertwined, but
Yes, I would say it wasn't so much a conscious process, although it is really important to me to work on, self-development, self-awareness. It was more trial and error and then like experiencing the pain of like burnout when I wasn't taking care of myself. So it was more the consequences that drove me to develop a practice of self-awareness. And again, like nobody's perfect at it. Like I still sometimes overschedule myself and let myself get to the point of burnout where it's like, oh, I don't want to get off the couch today, but I have to because I scheduled all these appointments. And then I'm feeling really bad because I haven't taken care of myself. And so, on top of feeling physically and emotionally burnt out, I'm then like beating myself up for
yeah.
like not preventing that because I know better. So, that's where actually I'd love to talk to you about the mindset and the self-awareness and but yeah, I think over time it's just trial and error and also trying to avoid pain, the pain of not feeling
Of the
well.
consequence. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I just, for everybody listening, I want to really emphasize this. It is not perfect. We will mess things up 100%. We will get to the point where we're like, oh, I'm getting there again, or I'm getting close to this burnout, or maybe even get into a second burnout or whatever it is. And that is normal. Like, the only thing to do there is to just go, oh, that's interesting. And then pick it back up. And funnily enough, and I was just talking like on a podcast with Amy of Perfect Behavior, I was talking actually about Rusty and how he had regress is not the right word, but because he had back pain and because it was flaring up, his reactivity also increased and was flaring up, I guess, if you want to put it that way. And I was kind of figuring out what to do because, okay, yeah, we figured out it was the pain. We got him on pain meds, but of course now he rehearsed the pattern. It had become, like it sort of ingrained a little bit again. And what she said in that episode was, you just go back to basics. You know what to
Mhm.
do. Like, you know what to do when there's reactivity in play. That's it. You already know that there's no magic involved there. You just do the thing. And hearing you say this is my long way around. That's how my brain works. It's the same for humans. You're gonna get to a part where it's like, oh, I'm back here, or I'm back at this place that I didn't really want to be, and you just go back to basics. Like you just do the same thing. There's no judgment, no nothing on it, no need to beat yourself up, no need for all of that. It's like, oh, I'm here. Got it. I just have to do all those things that are going to get me out of it again. And you very rightfully pointed out that, like you're feeling bad and then you're adding to the bad because of, oh, I should know better. I think that's the whole sort of thing that is coaching, is simply peeling off that second layer. We're not going to be able to prevent bad stuff from happening. We also don't want to always feel happy peppy because that's nonsense. When something bad happens, you want to feel bad. But that second layer, yeah, that I should have known better, that's, I think, what gets addressed there. So I love that. I also actually very much love the idea of kickboxing. Um, my kids and I were always like, when are we buying that punching bag? We should put up the punching bag somewhere in the house. We haven't done that yet. For my movement outlet is swimming, so
Oh,
we're getting
nice.
there. Um, what about taking time for you without the dogs. Do you do that? And how do you feel about that? And how do your clients feel about doing that?
Yes, that's a super important. And I think especially where I work directly with a lot of client dogs, plus I have three of my own dogs, and fulfilling all of their physical and emotional needs. And I feed raw, so that's a whole thing where I'm preparing food and calculating their diets. Like it's a lot. And so sometimes I do want to go on a hike with my friends and not bring my dogs. And sometimes people are surprised. They're like, "Oh, you didn't bring your dogs." It's like, "No, I need some time to just be a human and be with my pack of humans." Like, and that's actually really important not to feel guilty about that because um they're they're pretty needy. They're pretty
Really? Mine is never, never. What are you talking about?
So, yeah, you have to, it's like you have to recharge your battery with whatever that means for you, having dinner with a friend or yeah, going for a walk without the dogs and don't feel bad about it. Like they're okay.
We hope. And even if they are, no, we're kidding. People are kidding. I just want to have addressed that because I think that is still such a big issue for people that the amount of guilt they feel for, taking care of themselves or going somewhere without the dog. If you have a dog with severe separation anxiety and you're working up your minutes, please don't, like, we're not trying to gaslight you here or trying to tell you, like, do all those things. No, but just to find a way to also take care of your own needs. I'm just curious if you want to talk about this or not, but because you mentioned burnout, and one of the things that actually that there's a lot of talk about right now is also burnout amongst dog professionals. And so a lot of the people that I've talked to, they fall into sort of two groups or two camps. One is I had a job, I burned out, and I decided I wanted to do something different with my life. And I had this challenging dog or whatnot, and that turned me onto the path of dog training. The other camp is sort of being a dog trainer and also burning out as a dog trainer because of the huge emotional toll that it takes. The fact that most dog trainers, and I guess dog trainer, like we've talked about, isn't probably not even the right term anymore because we're also working with the humans, or you are. I shouldn't say we because I'm not a dog trainer. But those people are highly empathic, highly involved. And so being able to step back or being able to put up boundaries is difficult. On top of that, the whole I can't save them all or
Mhm.
that part. For you, if you want to talk about it, was the burnout as a dog trainer? Like, what do you think contributed to it? And would you have something to say to people who are in the same boat? Long way around.
Yes, part of the more recent burnout I was experiencing, I believe, was highly related to compassion fatigue, where I am working with highly traumatized dogs who are experiencing above average levels of stress and anxiety throughout their day. And I'm trying to resolve that for them and give them some relief while also educating the owners and sometimes becoming a little too emotionally involved with that either an individual dog or attached to the results that that dog is going to get or not get because of what the owner is or is not capable of doing. And so that is something that I'm still working on trying to figure out, like, how do I stay passionate about what I'm doing, but also keep some sort of boundary where I don't get completely wrapped up in every single case, like entangled with the result and feeling like so much pressure on me that like if the owner, say the owner decides to rehome the dog or return it to the shelter, which does happen, I feel that I failed. I either failed to rehabilitate the dog, I failed to educate the owner. It is a very real thing. It's extremely emotional. So I'm still working on that. I'm actually reading a book right now called Trauma Stewardship, which I would recommend, which does talk a lot about how do you manage this? How do you care about your clients, but not care so much that it takes over your whole emotional life? So I think a lot of caring professionals, this happens to them. And then I think with the dogs, there's this sense that like the dog is this helpless
Mm.
player, and it's like my job to educate the owner and really help the owner to kind of facilitate this dog's emotional rehab and journey back to health. And so like I said, if that's not successful, it feels bad. There's no way around it. It just there's ups and downs, and then you have cases where it's like, wow, this person really surprised me. They completely committed 100% to the training plan, and within like a few months the dog is like a different dog. So you kind of have to ride on those highs and remind yourself that like every situation is different. Some people are going to find great success. The dog is almost like ready to change. And then other times it's just not a partnership that works out. And that's not really my fault because obviously I was able to help in these other cases. So it's not something that I did or didn't do. It just kind of like either wasn't meant to be or, I don't know. I'm still struggling with that, to be honest.
Yeah. I would almost want to go into coaching here, but I think what that or how I work on that with, I'm just gonna call them my people, and they're I also work with not just with dog guardians, but with dog trainers who are dealing with this, is to redefine the story, to redefine failure. Because, right, this is the first thing that we say. Like, I feel like I failed. Failed is, if we're talking about labels, failed is a label that we put on the situation, and failed makes you feel a certain way, pretty crappy in general. And is that helpful? Can we tell the story in a different way that doesn't gaslight us, that doesn't negate what's going on, but that allows us to deal with it in a more productive way? Can we deal with feeling awful without letting it consume us? Because again, if what I mentioned earlier, the second layer of things, we feel awful and we tend to make that want to go away as quickly as possible so that we can help the next dog, which we can't help if we're feeling awful. And this pushing away of the awfulness is usually counterproductive. And so the pushing away of it, the not wanting it there, the fighting it, that's the second layer. That's what I work on with my people. But it's really like redefining this story, redefining what it does, what it means to do your best, and uncoupling that of the result. Which doesn't mean that if the result is positive that we don't get to use that and have a big party and use that to stimulate us and move us forward, because exactly like I said earlier, that is something that is serving us, that is something that's helping us, but also really uncoupling. There's no other way for me to put it, like uncoupling the idea of failure and wins from the result. Like, let the win be how you showed up, right? Let that be it, and not necessarily the result of the client or the result for the dog, while at the same time allowing the sadness and the grief and all of that. It's a bit meta, but that's what came up for me as you said that. Um, Also, this has nothing to do with you, but I am going to plug it. Annie Phoenix, who was on the podcast earlier and who wrote a book about um, positive reinforcement training for reactive and aggressive dogs, she actually started a foundation. So I'm just gonna put it out there for the trainers listening, for professionals in the animal training industry, so dog trainers, and not just dog trainers, who help them with this foundation helps them with these topics. So burnout, there's a suicide prevention aspect to it too, because amongst dog trainers, and like we said, like the people are always like these are the empathic people. These are the people who care incredibly deeply. The suicide rates are higher there as well. So this foundation has free resources for professionals in the industry who are struggling with compassion fatigue and all of these things. So I'm just going to plug it. It's called the Phoenix Advocacy Center. People want to Google it, you'll find it. Has nothing to do with you, but it came up, and I think it's a wonderful initiative. And since we're talking compassion fatigue, I want to put that out there. We've gone all over the place, but that's what you get with unscripted stuff, and that's what you get with me asking questions. Is there something I always ask people, like, what's your soapbox? Is there something that you want to get out there? Because I'm sure we've not, like, we've only touched the tip of things. But tell me, what's on your mind? What is something that you would love to share still, or ask me? Who knows?
Yes. Well, I definitely want to do this again so I can pick your brain because I do need some mindset coaching and I do think it's really important. I'm going to look up that organization that you just plugged because we all need to take better care of our own selves, our own nervous systems. I think that's where it starts. Like for me, it's all about safety, connection, trust. So my thing is like, I'm not really training the dog. I'm helping you with your relationship with the dog and also helping the dog to restore their nervous system health. So that's why it's hard for me to call myself a dog trainer. I'm not focused on commands and the dog being obedient because I feel like the dog naturally falls into sync with you when the connection is there and when there's a sense of safety and when we're co-regulating instead of co-dysregulating. And so I guess that's kind of my little spiel is that we need to take care of ourselves and take care of our dogs in a way that addresses just like really basic biological needs rather than looking at the dog as a, a being that's out of line or misbehaving. Like there's always an underlying reason for that. And it's usually just their emotional capacity to deal with stress. And so if we increase the dog's emotional capacity, then the training, in quotes, becomes super easy. Because if your dog's happy, healthy, emotionally balanced, like, of course, they want to please you or learn from you or partner with you. So I guess that's my sort of thing is like, let's work from the bottom up.
Yeah, it's almost like Maslow's pyramid, safety and all of that. That's the prerequisite for everything. I do think also, not that it's usually helpful to think in terms of what would I do differently if I had to do it over again, because the thing is done. Still, if I had to do it now, I would be to beep with the sit down, stand, whatever cues. My focus would be entirely, like you said, on the bond with my dog, and the rest follows. And I was joking that because Rusty did bark quite a bit at the beginning of our recording. We had to pause a couple of times. Well, you probably won't hear it because we'll be cutting it out. But I did say, like, I walked the dog, I fed the dog, I trained the dog, and training to me is not training him to, I don't know, to do stuff. I mean, I am training him to do stuff, but it's my time with him. It's where we work together, where we do stuff that he likes, and even there, I had to learn, like you said, where it's about the bond and really looking at your dog. I had to learn to look at him better and figure out, okay, this is something that you're not interested in. This isn't making you happy, and as a result, it's also not making me happy. And sort of figuring out like what are the things that we really love doing together. And it's then not training for training sense. It's training for let's do fun stuff together time. Sorry, that was again a long way around, but that's what's going on. But the bond for sure, the safety, the needs, the rest is secondary, 100%. And probably we should also recognize that the same is true for us as well. We need all of those things as well. We also need the safety, we need the connection. You already mentioned the name of your, well, we're like, what are we call it? It's not dog training, the name of your company.
Well, my company name is Canine Movement Lab, and I guess I'm leaning towards calling what I do somatic therapy for dogs so that people don't come to me just for obedience training.
If they want this type of non-obedience training, but somatic work, where and that's maybe something that we can talk about another time as well. Massage. I love that you're doing that with the dog. I tried to do it with Rusty, but I need more practice and I need more guidance. So if after the podcast or another time, I definitely want to talk to you about that. But where can people find you? So probably the website is the name, but
Mhm.
Instagram, Facebook, the other places where people can find you, plug the heck out of it.
Sure. Yeah. So it is caninemovementlab.com. And on Instagram, I'm Canine Movement Lab. And on Facebook, I have just my personal page, Leah Lycos, but it's like a professional personal page. So you can follow my content there. And I mainly just post about dogs. So I really use that as a professional account. If anyone's on Facebook, you can just find me at Leah Lycos. But yeah, everything else is Canine Movement Lab. I have a YouTube channel, so I have a whole library of videos that will show almost all of these exercises in pretty good detail. So if anyone's interested in that, you can check out the YouTube channel and
That's Canine Movement Lab as well, or what do people look for?
Mhm.
Okay, perfect.
Yes. Yeah. I think that's it.
Well, I can't let you go yet. Um, Even after all of this, like people might just now go off and Google you and just not listen to the rest of this anymore. But I would be remiss if I didn't ask you to comment on the three words that are always the same that I ask everyone at the end of the episode, which are expectation, frustration, and celebration. When you hear these three words, what comes up for you in relation to life and life with our dogs? You can take it any way, any direction that you want. No guidance whatsoever, but what comes up? What is your brain telling you?
Okay, so I guess I will talk about my newest and youngest dog. She's not really that new to me now. I've had her for 2 years, but Mia, I guess which I don't call her that, her name, I call her Mimi, but that's the name she came with was Mia. And I guess my expectation was, even though I knew I was like her third or fourth owner, even at, the age of 1.5 years old, I guess the expectation was that she was going to be an easy dog for me. And then the frustration, is that the next one?
Yeah.
Was that, oh, she turned out to be one of my hardest dogs. And then the celebration is that what it has brought to my life is even further introspection and acceptance of myself, self-acceptance. And then, celebrating the bond that I do have with her now, which is really special, and we're still on that journey. And I'm really looking forward to how it's going to turn out because I've always found in the past that the most difficult relationships or the most difficult sort of behavioral cases of dogs that I take on are always the most special relationships that I end up having, even though they do tend to cause me a lot of stress at the get-go. But that's why we create such a deep relationship is the work and the love and energy that I pour into it. So, yeah, I think that's kind of a good way to sum it up.
Cool. And I love that it's the fourth word. It's not in the three words, but what you're basically saying is that you're looking towards the future with curiosity, which is an emotion that I love a lot. It's like, well, I wonder where this is going to go. I wonder where this journey is going to take me. And I think that's always such a nice judgment-free way of looking at things that just keeps you very open to all the possibilities. So I love that you just kind of mentioned that. It's sort of like, where is this going to take me? That then leaves me just to say, Leah, I love this conversation. I think people are going to get a lot out of it. I already learned stuff, so I'm already golden. Thank you so much for making this happen, for your time, because it is the most valuable commodity that we have, and coming on the podcast. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you so much. I really had fun. I appreciate you so much, and I can't wait to do it again.
Yeah, I'm curious to what you're going to ask me when I get on your podcast.
Yes.
Gosh, I wonder now. I wonder if I should have asked different questions because I'm definitely going to get this back.
We'll have fun.
So, yeah, for sure. Thank you again.
All right, you take care.